of GDP, and debt interest costs are nearly 4% of GDP. Does the Chancellor agree that it would be irresponsible to fund any cost of living support by increasing borrowing, which would further drive up borrowing costs, choke off growth, and saddle future generations with totally unfair debt?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question, and can I also congratulate him for running, I think, his fourth London Marathon this week for a cancer charity, which I know is very dear to his heart. He makes a really important point, because while people are calling for immediate support, and I understand that, the impact of the previous governments, and I understand why the former Chancellor did what he did, but the untargeted support, which cost, I think, over £100 billion in total, meant that interest rates, inflation and taxes has ended up being higher than they needed to be. Now, we managed to reduce government borrowing by £20 billion last year. The budget deficit is below 5% for the first time since 2019. But sticking to fiscal responsibility is not just good for the public purse, it's also good for ordinary families and businesses, because I am determined that we don't go back to the high inflation, the high interest rates and the high taxes, which would be the inevitable result if we had an untargeted response to this conflict.
Paul Foster.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, cost of living, cost of living, cost of living. They're the three words that my constituency in South Ribble and the small area of Chorley that I represent contact me about every single week. What they don't contact me about is the Westminster bubble and process. Will the Chancellor please assure me she will stay laser-focused on delivering for the constituency of South Ribble around the cost of living and not allow the noise and disruption from the party opposite to put her off? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for standing up for the people of South Ribble and the issues that matter to them. Since the general election, there's been 6 cuts in interest rates, which is the best way to help people with the cost of living, especially if they have a mortgage. Before this conflict began, unemployment was falling, the economy was growing, the deficit was coming down, and interest rates have gone down 6 times as well. I will continue to focus on the cost of living, because that's the thing that matters most of all to all of our constituents.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Australia, Italy, India and more have all slashed fuel duty in response to Trump's idiotic war in Iran, and we Liberal Democrats are calling for fuel duty to be cut by 12p per litre here too. Last week, the Chancellor claimed that anyone calling for a cut in fuel duty was economically illiterate because it would push up inflation. But according to the OBR, the current 5p fuel duty cut has led to a 0.2% reduction in the rate of inflation. So does the Chancellor think that all of these other countries who are helping their citizens and the OBR are economically illiterate? Or does she accept the fact that her government might be in the wrong and it is really time to act?
Look, the honourable lady last time she stood up in the chamber said she wanted a 10p cut in fuel duty. Now it's a 12p cut in fuel duty. What she has failed to explain is how on earth she's going to pay for any of these policies. And as the former Chancellor has just set out, the result of untargeted support will result in higher inflation, higher interest rates and higher taxes as well, which would hurt people with the cost of living in St Albans and around the country. Now, I support what the Liberal Democrats say about opposing the war in Iran. That is our policy. But they appear to be the only people on the planet that think a war in the Middle East is somehow good for the Treasury coffers. Now, I wouldn't be surprised that if in their next manifesto they said that they would commit to closing the Strait of Hormuz for good. It's not good economic policy, and I'm afraid that says a lot about the Liberal Democrats' policies.
They're doing good.
Better.
Question 6, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer this question together with question number 7 and question number 14. The Government has already taken action on fuel affordability at the pump. At the budget last year, the Government extended the 5p per litre cut for a further 5 months, and we've also cancelled the increase that would have otherwise taken place in line with inflation at the start of this financial year.
Dave Dougal.
Mr Speaker, if you were a gardener with a Renault Traffic or a builder with a Ford Ranger in Scotland, you'll be paying over £150 just to fill up at the pump to get to your work. And when Spain and Poland and Germany and France and Italy and Ireland and Australia are all intervening to help their industry and economy, our Chancellor here stands idly by and congratulates herself on the quality of her inaction. Well, we don't want to hear from Anas Sarwar in Scotland because he promised £300 off our energy bills and they're now £700 higher than that promise in 2024. We want to hear from the Chancellor. What is she going to do specifically on diesel and when she's going to do it to keep the grafters of Scotland turning up for their work?
Mr Speaker, the SNP have had ample opportunity in Scotland to invest in energy, infrastructure, to invest in the changes that we need in our economy to bring down energy bills. And when it comes to fuel...
OK, carry on, Minister.
And when it comes to fuel duty, it is of course worth noting that fuel duty is lower today in cash terms than it has been in any year since 2009.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker. If the increase in fuel prices is to blame for the stagnating economy and not the Chancellor's two disastrous budgets, then why does she believe that further raising fuel duty in September will help in reducing the cost of living, when in fact it will further harm the economy and be another hit directly to the pockets of my constituents?
Mr Speaker, before the conflict in Iran started, we saw inflation falling, we saw unemployment falling, and we saw growth increasing at 0.5% in 1 month at the start of this year. That showed that our economic plan was the right plan for this country, and it's important that we stick to it rather than return to the bad old days of the high borrowing and high interest rates that the Conservative Party brought us when they had a chance to run the economy.
Labour are at war with motorists, and Reform's idea, in fact they're not even here today, of protesting about fuel prices was yesterday at their non-event. It's only those of us on these benches who are standing up for our motorists and our constituents. So I'd like to ask the Chancellor today, will she take this opportunity to help our constituents, our businesses and our motorists and adopt our plan to extend the fuel duty relief? Yes or no?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I do agree with the honourable member that the Reform sort of rabble yesterday was deeply underwhelming. On the point of fuel duty, look, at the moment, the rate of fuel duty is lower than it was at any point under the previous government, or it was never lower under the previous government than it is now. And in real terms, the rate of fuel duty is lower than it has been at any point since 1993.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The fuel duty freeze is, of course, very welcome for drivers of petrol and diesel vehicles, but this is the second time in just over 4 years that petrol and diesel prices have gone through the roof as a result of international oil and gas uncertainty. Isn't it time that we gave as much support as possible to those who want to transition to electric vehicles? Auto Trader says that the average price of electric vehicles is already lower than it is for petrol and diesel. So will the government confirm they are bringing forward the plans for greater ability to charge at home and bringing down the cost of electricity as far and fast as possible so that more drivers can benefit from long-term lower driving costs?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. He is right that we are seeing a continued uptake in electric vehicles. We saw that in March of this year. It was the highest ever. There were more electric vehicles purchased in March than in any month in British history. We can see that take-up is continuing to increase. This government is increasing and expanding the grants for those who want to buy an electric vehicle, and we're making progress too with permitted development rights so that those who don't have easy access to charging in their driveways can have easy access and cheaper access to on-street charging too.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Even before the current Middle East conflict, fuel suppliers in Merthyr Tydfil, part of my constituency, were charging on average 10p per litre more than other parts of my constituency and in neighbouring towns. Even London fuel prices were cheaper than Merthyr Tydfil, and the situation has not improved since. I've written to suppliers and met with some with limited success, and also asked the CMA to look at the matter, which they have so far not done. So can I ask the Chancellor to offer whatever assistance she can in urging fuel providers in Merthyr Tydfil to act fairly, and can she also urge the CMA to consider what they can do to ensure fair play for my constituents?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his question and the representation and the work that he is undertaking on behalf of his constituents in a rural part of our country. We are making sure that all garages are on the new Fuel Finder website that the Chancellor has introduced. That should drive up competition to make it easier for the people that he represents to compare the cost at the pump in different garages nearby. It's good to hear that he's been in touch with the CMA. The Chancellor has been in discussion with them too about making sure we have competition in this industry. And if it would help him to get a meeting with the CMA, then I would happily assist with that.
James Welsh, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Whilst Conservatives froze fuel duty for 14 years, Labour is planning to increase it by 5p, costing families £150 a year and hauliers £2,000. And when she was asked to reverse her hike, the Chancellor said she was loath to spend government money doing so. There's no such thing as government money. There's only taxpayers' money. So rather than increase taxes again, will she actually help households and businesses facing higher prices and scrap this fuel hike?
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are fiscally responsible. We will make sure that we continue to get borrowing down in a sustainable way, as we did over the last financial year, with borrowing falling by £20 billion. Whenever they've had the chance, they've borrowed more, which pushes up interest rates for everyday families and means that we have to have higher taxes in the long run. That is not the approach that we will take. And one final quick thing, Mr. Speaker, their plans that were set out in the final budget before they left office would have had fuel duty increase every single year. Instead, we have frozen it since we took over.
There you go.
Number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are reforming government procurement rules so that we can buy more that is made in this country. And we've already changed the rules around steel, shipbuilding, energy infrastructure and AI. But I don't just want big companies to be able to get contracts. I want to help smaller businesses and also charities access government procurement. The government is the biggest buyer of goods and services in the economy, and I want more of that money to be spent here in Britain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Chancellor for her answer. In Stafford, we have world-class manufacturers like GE Vernova producing the technology that powers our national grid. Yet for far too long, British employers like these haven't had the money given to them by British government contracts. So I therefore warmly welcome the government's commitment to reform public sector procurement, to grow British industry, British skills and British jobs. Can the Chancellor tell us how this new approach will ensure that government spending reaches manufacturers and businesses in constituencies like Stafford and towns across our country, so that when the taxpayer spends, Britain builds?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And I was slightly disappointed that she didn't mention that today is Staffordshire Day, and Staffordshire oatcakes are available for members on all sides of the House in the tea room. I think that's what you wanted me to say. But on the wider issue, we do need to buy, make and sell more in Britain, with more contracts going to firms in Staffordshire, not just for their brilliant oatcakes, but also for their ceramics.
Assembly, Father of the House.
Will the Chancellor agree that post-Brexit, government departments have much more freedom to buy British, and under the Procurement Act of 2023, they can ignore EU directives? So will the Chancellor walk with us into the broad sunlit uplands of post-Brexit Britain and use the freedoms that we have obtained for this country?
Well, they cheer, but they didn't use any of them. And it's this government that is doing everything we can to buy, make and sell more in Britain. But one of the best ways that we can grow our economy is to work more closely with our friends, our trading partners and our neighbours in the European Union, whether that is through rejoining Erasmus, playing our full part in Horizon, whether it is through a deal for our food and farming sector so that we can export the great stuff we make here in Britain into the EU, and in so many other areas. And that is why we are determined to rebuild that relationship with the European Union.
Good fortune.
Number 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, well done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reforms to business property relief maintain significant relief for owners of business assets. This is beyond what is available to others and is more generous than at any time, for example, under Margaret Thatcher, when the rate of relief was a maximum of 50% on all business assets, including the first £2.5 million. And I don't think members opposite would argue that we didn't see growth in the private sector while Thatcher was in power.
Good fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I, of course, agree with the Minister that Margaret Thatcher really was the sunny uplands of this country. Mr. Speaker, SMEs provide the backbone for our economy in Bromley and Biggin Hill, and many of those businesses are still family-owned, suffering from the slew of taxation put upon them by this Labour government. Family Business UK's analysis, published just last month, said that 57% of businesses are still suffering from the business property relief, which, despite, as the Minister alluded to, the slight U change, is still impacting their business. Would the Minister agree with me that the best way to growth is to support small businesses and not to tax them out of existence?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad that the member opposite acknowledges that while Margaret Thatcher was in power, she was actually taxing through business property relief these businesses more than this Labour government is doing. We do have a fair and balanced approach when it comes to making sure we can raise revenues from the very largest businesses and agricultural businesses in order to raise revenue to sustainably support the reduction in borrowing that this government is bringing about.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, hundreds of small family businesses across Cornwall will soon be subject to a significant increase in their property costs as a result of the VOA's decision to reclassify serviced offices, business centres and co-working spaces. Would the Chancellor arrange for me to meet with Treasury officials and the VOA to discuss how the impacts of this reclassification may be mitigated?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I am aware of the issue that he raises. I have met with the representatives of the sector in recent weeks to discuss it. It follows from changes to case law that have taken place over recent years, but it is, of course, an important issue that affects many businesses, and I would be very happy to meet with him to discuss it.
Mohammed.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government is taking action to tackle child poverty, including by removing the 2-child limit and expanding free school meals and breakfast clubs, including 7 breakfast clubs already rolled out in the Dewsbury and Batley constituency. As a result of these changes, 550,000 children will be lifted out of poverty in this Parliament. That will be the biggest reduction of child poverty in any Parliament ever.
Well, Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Chancellor for her answer. In my constituency of Dewsbury and Batley, 44.4% of children are living in poverty, according to the latest government figures. Yet Oxfam reports that just 56 billionaires in the UK now hold more wealth than 27 million people combined in our country, with their wealth rising by over £230 million each on average last year. Does the Chancellor accept that child poverty is not inevitable, but the result of political choices about who this government wants to protect? And can the Chancellor explain how the Child Poverty Task Force can succeed without the Treasury being willing to pursue far more fair and equitable wealth distribution through closing tax loopholes, taxing wealth, not just income, and preventing...
Order. I think the Chancellor's got the drift. Chancellor, yes.
Child poverty is absolutely not inevitable, and that is why we are lifting 550,000 children out of poverty. It is always Labour governments that lift children out of poverty and Tory governments that put children back into poverty. And the numbers that the honourable gentleman used are appalling. 44% of children should not be growing up in Dewsbury and Batley in poverty, and that is why we have made the change that we have to lift those children out of poverty, to give all of them a decent start in life.
Andrew, are you standing? Andrew Peck.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. One of the worst legacies of the last government was that 43% of children growing up in Peterborough are living in poverty. Nearly 10,000 children will be affected by the lifting of the child cap in Peterborough alone. Can the Chancellor assure me that whilst we've made huge progress on this, that we keep a razor-like focus on child poverty as we deal with the cost of living crisis and the fallout from the war in Iran?
I thank my honourable my honourable friend for that question. And 10,000 children in one constituency lifted out of poverty by just one of the policy changes that we have made to reduce child poverty, I think shows the difference that this Labour government is making. And when combined with the breakfast clubs, the free school meals, the extension of childcare, the Renters' Rights Act, the building of new homes, that is why this government is set to deliver the biggest ever reduction in child poverty in one parliament.
The Judge.
Question number 12, please, Mr Speaker.
Sorry.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. First of all, I would like to offer my deepest condolences following the tragic death of 2 young children in my honourable friend's constituency. I know that this will be an incredibly distressing time for the whole community, and I think the thoughts of the whole House are with that community. We recognise that everyday living costs remain too high, and that is why we're supporting households with their energy bills, and it's also why we've frozen prescription charges for a second year in a row and frozen rail fares for the first time in 30 years. It's also why we have lifted the national living wage and the national minimum wage, so people on low pay see their money go further.
The Judge.
Thank the Chancellor for her condolences. I was there at the site of the tragedy on Sunday laying flowers, and it is very upsetting for everyone in my constituency. One of my favourite places for lunch is the Pomegranate Cafe, together with the Central Community Shop within my constituency, which is a community-based social enterprise founded in partnership between the Good Shepherd Charity, Wolves Foundation and the Labour-controlled City of Wolverhampton Council to provide affordable food, with all profits from the cafe donated back to the Good Shepherd's free-to-access services, supporting their work to end homelessness, assist recovery, provide access to services around training and employability, and providing meaningful pathways out of poverty in Wolverhampton. Will the Chancellor please join me in congratulating everyone involved with the Pomegranate Cafe?
Once again, I think the Chancellor's got the question. Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for raising the excellent work that the City of Wolverhampton Council is doing to help people with the cost of living, and particularly to help the most vulnerable people in our society. And it's why, combined with the measures that we are taking to reduce child poverty, to increase the basic state pension and the new state pension, but also what we're doing with Pride in Place, including in Whitmore, Reens and Dunstall Hill in his own constituency, to improve outcomes for people in Wolverhampton West and around the country.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 13.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, this government is investing in Wales's industrial future and unlocking economic growth, including by providing £2.5 billion for the UK's first small modular reactor in Anglesey to support up to 3,000 jobs and power 3 million homes. We've also recently agreed a new £50 million defence growth deal for Wales. We're backing Welsh free ports and investment zones, and we are connecting people and businesses with at least £445 million worth of rail infrastructure investment right across Wales.
Thank you. The people of Mega and Undy have been celebrating the fact that they're getting a new train station thanks to 2 Labour governments working together to deliver it. So it's unbelievable that Reform's leader in Wales recently said, nobody wants or needs these new stations. So does the Minister agree with me that new railway stations are, of course, essential for economic growth? And does he think Reform just don't listen to what people in Wales want, or they just don't care?
Mr Speaker, I completely agree with my honourable friend that the UK and Welsh Labour government's generational commitment to the future of rail in Wales is fantastic for her constituents right across Monmouthshire. It is frankly, Mr Speaker, outrageous to hear Reform's leader in Wales trying to tell people what they want. And even more shocking that they promised to rip up our plan. New railway stations, Mr Speaker, are indeed critical for economic growth, and only Labour will build the rail network that people in Wales need and deserve.
Becky Cooper.
15, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for her question. The government is acting to ease the cost of living for commuters, including by extending the £3 national bus fare cap to March 2027. We have also frozen regulated rail fares for the first time in 30 years, and that will save the average commuter travelling from Worthing to London using an annual season ticket £360 a year.
Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for freezing rail fares. This will indeed help ease the cost of living for many commuters, like my constituents in Worthing West, many of whom do have jobs here in London or Brighton. Southern Rail have been rated as the worst value-for-money rail operator in a national passenger survey. So, will the Minister please ensure that as we move to nationalisation of our service and finally see the back of Southern Rail next month, that there is investment available for key issues such as reducing overcrowding and improving reliability and punctuality of our vital South Coast services?
Hear, hear.
Mr Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right to make clear that improving services for passengers is our absolute priority as rail operations come into public ownership. And when Southern Rail is brought into public ownership, they will be expected to focus relentlessly on improving passenger experience, improving reliability, improving punctuality, and they will be held to account for doing so.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In rural areas like Rutland and Stamford, we are reliant on our cars, so fuel costs are hitting us hard. So I have a simple ask to the Chancellor she could deliver on now. Will she expand the 5p per litre rural fuel duty relief to more areas as soon as possible, particularly Leicestershire, Rutland and Lincolnshire, who desperately need it?
Mr Speaker, as my honourable friend, the Exchequer Secretary, has set out already today many times in relation to fuel duty, we inherited plans from the previous government that would have seen fuel costs go up for people across the country. We have extended the 5p cut in fuel duty, we have extended the freeze, and that is an important way of helping people with the cost of living right now.
Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Number 16.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government has introduced a support package worth £4.3 billion to protect ratepayers across the country against the impact of the independently set new property values, valued for the first time since the pandemic. We've also introduced permanently lower multipliers for eligible retail, hospitality and leisure properties. These are worth nearly £1 billion a year and will benefit over 750,000 high street businesses.
Mr Speaker, I recently met Chris, the owner of Chapters Hair in Bromsgrove, who told me that after 25 years of trading, current conditions are the most difficult that he has faced, and he directly attributes this to the decisions taken by the Chancellor. Why is it that the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the government across the board is riding roughshod over what businesses think, the people who know best how to run their businesses, and when will the government get off their backs and get on their side?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Under the previous government, the multiplier, the tax rate paid by businesses, medium-sized businesses or the very largest businesses was exactly the same within business rates. But we have implemented significant reform to the way business rates works so that it supports the high street, and the tax rate paid by small high street businesses will now be 33% lower than the one paid by the largest properties such as online giants. Of course, Mr Speaker, the revaluation since the pandemic has had an effect, and that's why we've stepped in to provide support.
Richard Fuller, Shadow Minister.
Mr Speaker, a comprehensive survey this month by Hospitality UK shows that 1 in 7 of our hotels, pubs and restaurants will close as a direct result of the Chancellor's policies. Many of those businesses represent the hopes and dreams, the hard work and savings of the people who set them up. So, Mr Speaker, as I am permitted, rather than the Minister coming to the dispatch box, could I ask the Chancellor to come to the dispatch box and answer this? If it wasn't me standing here, it was one of those people who founded the business, now going through a gut-wrenching process of closing it because of her policies. What should she say to them?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the government wants to do all it can to support businesses up and down the country, small, medium and large. That's why we're working hard to make sure we can put the economic stagnation that we had over the last 14 years behind us. We're seeing economic growth rising, growing by 0.5% in February. We saw unemployment falling, and we were seeing government borrowing falling as well. Those are the long-term changes that we need to lay the foundations in order that businesses can grow and invest and hire more people. It's disappointing that the Conservatives seem to have forgotten what we need to provide stability in our economy.
Topicals. Catherine.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are on the right path with the right economic plan. Unemployment is down, the economy is growing, interest rates have been cut 6 times, and government borrowing was lower last year than it was the year before and is set to fall by more than in any other G7 economy. At the same time, the government is acting responsibly on the world stage. This is a war that we did not start, we did not enter, and we are working with our international allies to de-escalate. Our focus is in protecting family finances, supporting businesses and taking care with the public purse to improve Britain's economic resilience. That is the right plan for our country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Chancellor for her work to lift the two-child benefit cap, which was cruelly brought in by the Conservative government. And would she agree with me that not only is this morally the right thing to do, but it is economically good news for the 1,690 families in Lancaster and Wyre who will have more money in their pocket to spend in our local economy in Lancashire, unlike the super-rich who would have just taken it to offshore tax havens?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I hosted an event in Downing Street just a couple of weeks ago where I met with people who benefited from the change in the two-child limit and people who had campaigned for that change as well. And mums told me that they were going to use the money to pay for their kids to go to after-school club with their friends, swimming lessons that they weren't able to afford before, or a new school coat rather than a second-hand one. That is the difference that this money is making to families up and down the country, and I'm proud to be the Chancellor that has scrapped the two-child limit.
Shall the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir Mel Stride?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in response to the question from my right honourable friend, the member for Godalming and Ash on borrowing, the right honourable lady suggested that she was following a strict deficit reduction plan. I think she made reference to a reduction in the deficit of £20 billion year on year. But of course it's easy to reduce something if you pump it up recklessly in the first place. So could the right honourable lady tell the House how much more borrowing this government will undertake across this Parliament compared with the plans that she inherited from the last government?
Well, let's remember to start with that the plans we inherited from the past government would have seen fuel duties go up straight away. The plans that we inherited from the last government wouldn't have seen £29 billion investment a year into NHS. And the plans that we inherited from the last government would have seen business rates for our high street businesses, our retail, hospitality and leisure businesses go up straight away. We did make the decision to change that inheritance because we thought that was the right thing to do, and we still do. But the IMF confirmed that we have the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation of any country in the G7, and our borrowing as a share of GDP fell to 4.3% in the last financial year and is due to fall in every single year of this Parliament. It's the first time our deficit has been lower than 5% since 2019.
Mr. Speaker, doesn't seem to know how much additional borrowing this government is undertaking compared to the plans of the last government. So I will tell her it is £250 billion of additional borrowing across this Parliament. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, that this Chancellor is addicted to borrowing. And that means, compared with what otherwise would be the case, and she said exactly this in the answer to my right honourable friends, it means higher borrowing costs, higher inflation, higher interest rates and more sluggish growth, doesn't it?
What the right honourable gentleman is basically admitting is that he would have gone ahead with the increase in fuel duty, he would have gone ahead with the increases in business rates, and he would take that money out of our National Health Service. Well, we made those changes on the mandate we got at the election, and at the same time, we are reducing the budget deficit. So for the first time in 6 years, it is now below 5% of GDP, and as a result, the Bank of England have cut interest rates 6 times, helping all of our constituents with their mortgages. Very different from the hikes in mortgages that we saw under the previous Tory government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This weekend, while door knocking in Woodley, I spoke to a young father of 3 who, despite working multiple skilled jobs, feared being made homeless because of high and rising costs of rent. Will the Chancellor examine the case for a fixed-term rent freeze in the private rented sector to protect renters like my constituent from rising costs following the invasion of Iran and to bring inflation down in the wider economy?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and as she knows, sitting on the Treasury Select Committee, this government have also already taken action to reduce the cost of living and to bear down on inflation, with the changes around energy prices, around fuel duty, prescription charges and rail fares. And I will do everything in my power and use every lever we have to bear down on the cost of living, including for people in the private rented sector. That is why we have already introduced the Renters' Rights Act. And whilst for people who have mortgages, they have seen cuts in their mortgage rates since we came into office, we will do everything we can to also help people in the private rented sector, because we must ensure that this conflict in the Middle East does not result in our constituents being poorer.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Business rates bills have been landing on doormats over the last few weeks. And for some small businesses in St Albans and beyond, they tell me that the future looks bleak, with some taking the crushing decision to close their doors. Will the Chancellor please look again at the eye-watering revaluations and release the full 20p discount for small businesses, which the government legislated to do to save our high streets?
On business rates, the honourable member will know that this government inherited the plans that were set in train to have an independent revaluation of properties take place for the first time since the pandemic. It wouldn't have been the right thing to do to delay that pandemic for those businesses who'd seen their value, to delay that revaluation for those who'd seen their rates fall since the pandemic. So we went ahead with it, the independent valuation, and then we put in £4.3 billion of support to limit the increases in bills that businesses would pay. Of course, we keep all taxes under review, Mr. Speaker, but we did set out for the first time putting it in a differential within the business rate system so that high street businesses face a lower tax rate, a lower multiplier than the largest online giants.
Tonya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We now know what was going on in the economy before the attack on Iran. Growth was up, unemployment was down, borrowing was lower than forecast. The Chancellor took the right decisions and it was working. So does my right honourable friend agree that families and businesses should know that when times are tough, it is Trumpflation that is to blame?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And whilst other parties, specifically Reform and Conservatives, wanted us to enter this war, we stayed out of it and are working to de-escalate the conflict and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The economy was growing, interest rates were coming down, inflation was falling, and as a result, every month since I've become Chancellor, wages have risen by more than inflation, easing the cost of living pressures that the previous government oversaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At a recent meeting with members of Wantage Chamber of Commerce, local businesses were united in their concerns about business rates and unconvinced by recent government tweaks that ministers opposite have just alluded to. Page 31 of Labour's manifesto states the current business rate system disincentivises investment, creates uncertainty and places an undue burden on our high streets. In England, Labour will replace the business rate system so we can raise the same revenue but in a fair...
Order. Sorry, it's topicals and I'm going to get your other colleagues in, please.
Mr. Speaker, I'm always happy to take questions on business rates, even months after the decision set out at the budget. And I thank I thank the honourable member for reading out the Labour manifesto. We have made significant changes to business rates by introducing the new lower multiplier for high street businesses in order that they can pay a lower tax rate than the largest online giants.
Chris Bloor.
Mr. Speaker, given Reform in Worcestershire promised to cut taxes, but have instead increased county council tax for Redditch residents by nearly 9%, does the Chancellor agree with me that in the Redditch Borough Council elections on May the 7th, the only way to protect vital local services and keep taxes low is to vote for Redditch Labour candidates?
Yeah. Redditch Labour.
My honourable friend is absolutely right that whilst Worcestershire Reform-led council said that they would cut taxes, they've instead put them up. And so that is why, on May the 7th, I would urge people in Redditch and across the country to vote Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than 1.3 million people use lifetime ISAs to save for their first home. The property cap of £450,000 has been frozen since 2017, despite rising house prices, but those buying their first home over this threshold face a 25% penalty. First-time buyers across London are disproportionately affected. Data from February this year showed the average price paid for a first-time buyer in London was £463,000. So can the Chancellor tell us how is she ensuring first-time buyers in London are not unfairly disadvantaged by using this savings scheme?
Mr. Speaker, the Government is committed to making the aspiration of home ownership a reality for as many people as possible. And we recognise that the LISA isn't working for everyone. That's exactly why we've launched a short consultation into the implementation of a new ISA product that's going to support more first-time buyers. And that new product will include the government bonus being paid at the point the individual makes a withdrawal for a home purchase, therefore removing the need for a withdrawal charge.
Tom Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor will have seen the news this morning that BP profits have more than doubled, undoubtedly driven by the conflict in the Middle East. Does she agree that this shows the value of having a windfall tax at this point in time?
Thank my honourable friend for that question. The oil and gas sector will play an important part in our energy mix for many years to come, and we need to support them as we are, for example, through tiebacks. But it is important that the energy profits levy remains in place for now, because during this conflict we will be able to capture the profits made in the UK through the windfall tax. And the Conservatives and Reform, they oppose this tax, and that would just mean even higher profits for the oil and gas companies. We are also, as my honourable friend knows, delinking gas and electricity prices by increasing the electricity generators levy so that no energy company can make excess profits because of this conflict.
Chris Scotland.
Mr. Speaker, it has been widely reported in the press that the Chancellor is rightly considering issuing defence bonds. I know the Chancellor agrees with me on the value of defence R&D. So does the Chancellor or the Minister agree with me that these defence bonds could be a powerful way to increase R&D and raise economic growth?
Mr. Speaker, whatever the purpose, spending funded from bonds issued by the government adds to the national debt and so must be considered within the fiscal rules. But the honourable gentleman is right to point to the importance of research and development within the defence industry to support economic growth. And I'm proud that last year we allocated £400 million for UK defence innovation to foster a world-leading UK defence tech sector.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Labour government has ensured that as of this month, workers in Worsley and Eccles and across the country get sick pay from day one, including low-paid workers. As chair of the Usdaw Parliamentary Group and someone who's campaigned for this, I welcome this so much. Does the Chancellor agree with me that it is only Labour, with its trade union link, that's on the side of working people?
I would like to start by thanking my honourable friend for all the campaigning work that he has done in this area, and also pay tribute to the trade union Usdaw, their former General Secretary Paddy Lillis and their current General Secretary Joanne Thomas for all the work that they have done in this area. Strengthening statutory sick pay is part of our commitment to implement our plan to make work pay, ensuring that the safety net of sick pay is available to those who need it from day one.
Final question, Shocker Adam.
Mr. Speaker, Leicester South has a home ownership rate of just over 40%, which is nearly 23 points below the national average in a city where an average house is 8.5 times the local earnings. My young constituents are working very hard, doing everything responsibly, saving, etc., to get onto this ladder, yet the tax system offers them absolutely nothing, whilst incorporated landlords deduct full mortgage interest through a company structure. Canada and Nordic countries are offering targeted tax relief for first-time buyers. Can I ask the Chancellor, has she assessed introducing a similar relief here to ensure young people are supported by this tax system and not left behind?
Mr. Speaker, this Labour government is committed to enabling more people to realise the dream of home ownership. And mortgages have become more affordable under this government thanks to increased economic stability and 6 interest rate cuts.
Right, that completes questions. We now come to presentation of bills. James McCleary.
Thank you. New Haven West Beach Public Access Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 8th May.
Friday the 8th of May. Presentation of bill. James McCleary.
Defence Bonds Proposals Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 8th of May.
Friday the 8th of May. We now come to 10-minute rule motion, local area energy plans. James Nash.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to place a duty on local authorities in England to produce and maintain local area energy plans, to make provision about the content of those plans and limitations on that content, and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, I am proud that before I came to this place, I worked in the energy sector. At SSE, I led large industry change programmes such as faster switching, and at Northern Power Grid, I led the customer engagement work stream for its ED2 business plan. I therefore refer members to my register of interests. I'm also proud that as a councillor, I led the bottom-up public engagement about the future of West Burton Power Station in North Nottinghamshire. I set up a residents' planning group, which over 18 months demonstrated that Bassetlaw would make a fantastic home for the world's first prototype fusion energy plant. Nottinghamshire won that multi-billion-pound project, and I believe that the types and quality of community engagement were a key reason for doing so. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope that when I speak about the energy sector and community engagement in this place, it comes from a position of knowledge and understanding. And Mr. Speaker, it is worth stating that across the private and public sectors, there are some excellent examples of how communities can be taken on a journey from being uninformed to becoming knowledgeable, from being nervous to feeling confident, from being sceptical to being supportive as a result of good engagement. But sadly, this is not the norm for energy projects. I would like it to be, and I believe that it can be, through the universal adoption of local area energy plans. Mr. Speaker, this government is advancing one of the largest infrastructure programmes that this country has seen in generations. As part of this, tens of billions of pounds are rightly being spent on energy projects to end our dependency on international fossil fuel markets. At the same time, we are rewiring the energy network in response to changes in how we generate, store and distribute power. Ordinary people can now generate energy and sell power back to the grid, meaning we operate in a radically different energy landscape. And yet we are doing a lot of this without purposefully engaging communities about new infrastructure. In contrast to how we plan housing through local plans with formal regulation consultations, right now there is no meaningful strategic conversation or consultation about energy infrastructure. Yes, individual projects consult about their impacts, but there is no strategic oversight or decision-making required by local authorities, which are overwhelmingly reactive rather than proactive on energy matters. In my view, this has to change
if we want to successfully deliver our clean energy mission. Let me describe more clearly what is happening. Nationally, there is an emerging sense of order. The National Energy System Operator, NESO, is producing regional energy strategic plans for the whole of Great Britain by 2028. These are long overdue. Ofgem is simultaneously mapping the network upgrades needed in every locality, and the Clean Power 2030 Action Plan sets out what we need and, for the first time, where we need it. This means that the strategic framework for the energy sector is being strengthened across the board. And yet there is still a gap. NESO's regional plans need local inputs to be credible, demand projections, spatial constraints, sequencing preferences. But there is no meaningful or consistent dialogue taking place with local authorities. Without this, regional planning will either proceed on assumptions that are subsequently contested or stall while fighting objections to top-down diktats. Even worse, for communities with valuable national grid connections, they are inundated with projects, some of which are unlikely to ever proceed. I recently hosted a surgery in my constituency of Rushcliffe near Ratcliffe-on-Soar, which hosted a coal-fired power station. One parish councillor came to tell me that he and a small team of volunteers had reviewed over a dozen applications for new grid connections. Over a dozen. This level of disorder means host communities cannot see the wood for the trees and cannot picture how the projects that do go ahead will contribute to a joined-up narrative about local energy generation. Mr. Speaker, I believe there is an answer, which is mandatory local area energy plans. This isn't a new idea. Local area energy plans have existed as a methodology since 2018. Dozens of councils have produced them, detailing specific energy system changes, locations and delivery timelines. But in England, they remain voluntary. This means that the essential transition to green energy is potentially being made without consistent, meaningful local engagement across the country. And Mr. Speaker, I don't want to see this. So this bill proposes doing four things. First, it places a duty on every local authority in England to prepare, adopt and maintain a local area energy plan. Second, critically, it will state that these plans must identify sites capable of meeting energy generation targets set for each area. The Secretary of State would set those targets, but communities would help to decide where the infrastructure goes, much like local plans for housing. And in so doing, we spread the load and take people on the journey. Third, the bill makes data sharing by distribution network operators mandatory, meaning constraint data reinforcement plans, connection queues and capacity forecasts are provided in standardised formats. And fourthly and finally, this bill would give legal weight to local area energy plans. I believe energy needs and generation should be a material consideration in planning decisions and considered as formal evidence in network investment cases assessed by Ofgem. Let me be clear about what this bill does not do. It does not allow local area energy plans to contradict national policy statements, and it does not provide a mechanism for blocking infrastructure that has legitimate needs. Rather, it recognises that local area energy plans can help to shape where and how and when infrastructure is delivered locally and bring communities and elected representatives into a very important and consequential conversation. Handled badly, Mr. Speaker, energy projects become a source of major grievance. But handled well, as happened in Bassetlaw, they become something else. They become a story about jobs, about investment, about agency, and ultimately about consent and control. Mr. Speaker, this bill, I believe, is the only way to genuinely shift the dial away from "this was done to us" to "I had a say", away from "nobody cares" to "this project was considered and discussed locally", away from "why here" to "I understand why and how we are playing our part". I do not pretend that this bill will satisfy everyone. Some people do not want wind turbines or solar farms full stop, and no amount of process should do so. But in my experience, local opposition is not normally a fundamental objection to renewable energy. Rather, it is about feeling blindsided, lacking control, and not having a local narrative about which energy projects have been consented to and why, and understanding how this contributes to a better, cleaner local future. Mr. Speaker, it's estimated that £40 billion could be spent annually on new energy infrastructure between now and 2030. The question is not whether that money should be spent, it must be. The question is what evidence and what voices inform how and where it is spent. The window of opportunity is narrow because business plans for the next price control period and the regional energy strategic plans will both be finalised by 2028. Getting that local layer right now is therefore essential. It will reduce conflict, prevent delays and limit expensive changes down the line. So I hope that the government will take this matter seriously. Mr. Speaker, this bill gives communities a genuine stake in where and how energy infrastructure is delivered. It connects local planning to real investment decisions and ensures that transition will happen with people, not to them, while still making the essential shift to cleaner, greener energy eminently deliverable. I therefore commend this bill to the House.
The honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. The contrary no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Chris Bloor, Mayor Ellis, Alison Gardner, Josie Gosling, Chris Hinchliffe, Julie Minns, Karen Moon, Samantha Niblett and myself.
James Race.
Local Area Energy Plans Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 8th of May.
Friday the 8th of May. Well done, James. Before we begin the next item of business, I think it will be helpful to the House if I remind members of the decision in question and the procedures to today's debate. The decision before the House today is not about whether or not a contempt has been committed. It is about whether or not to refer the matter to Committee of Privileges. If such a referral is made, it will be for the committee in due course to report back to this House and make any necessary recommendations. The debate today may continue till 7 o'clock at the latest, at which time there will be either a need to a successful closure motion or a debate will be adjourned to a future date. In recent years, the length of time taken for debates on similar motions has ranged between 7 minutes and 5 hours. Any members who wish to speak need to stand to ensure that they catch my eye at the beginning of the debate. I would say to members that if the debate becomes very repetitive, we may have to consider whether it would be appropriate to accept an early closure motion. Finally, members may well be aware of the rules relating to good temper, moderation in parliamentary language. Today's proceedings are on a substantive motion relating to the specific responses by the Prime Minister to this House. It is perfectly in order for honourable members to question the veracity of those responses cited in the motion, or whether or not they were misleading. However, it is not in order to challenge in more general terms of truthfulness of the Prime Minister. Right. The Right Honourable Member for North West Essex Ministers table the motion to debate on the matter of privilege, which I've agreed should take precedence today. I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Kevin Murdoch, to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the motion standing in my name on the order paper. Mr. Speaker, shall we pick up where we left off last Tuesday, when we had an emergency debate about the government's accountability to Parliament over Peter Mandelson's appointment as our ambassador to the United States. The very next day, at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister read out selective quotes from Sir Ollie Robbins' evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and deliberately left out critical sections to make it seem as if Sir Ollie Robbins' evidence had exonerated him. The Prime Minister told the House, and I quote, "No pressure existed whatsoever in relation to this case." That is not what the record shows. Let me read Sir Ollie Robbins' exact quote. "Throughout January, my office and the Foreign Secretary's office were under constant pressure. There was an atmosphere of constant chasing. So how can the Prime Minister tell us that Sir Ollie Robbins said no pressure existed whatsoever? Everybody heard what Ollie Robbins said. We are not here to test whether members have good hearing. People can go and look in Hansard. The question today, as the Speaker said, is whether this should go to the Privileges Committee, whether this House and Labour MPs really believe in full due process, whether Labour MPs have the integrity to refer the Prime Minister to the Privileges Committee, knowing what we all know and can all read in Hansard. The Ministerial Code is very clear. Ministers who mislead the House must correct the record, and I quote, "at the earliest opportunity." It is very obvious that the Prime Minister, what the Prime Minister said at the dispatch box was not correct. It's clear that full due process was not followed. If Labour MPs allow the whips to force them to block the consequences of these decisions, it will degrade not just them, but this House. The question is, what kind of people are they? Are they people who will live up to the promises they made about standards and the rules mattering, or are they people who abandon their promises to be complicit in a cover-up? Yes, I will give way.
To the right honourable lady, on the 4th of February we passed our humble address here in this House with a unanimous vote of, well, a unanimous opinion of the whole House that all of the documents should be made available and published. And those that wait for the question, and those that were considered sensitive should go to the Intelligence and Security Committee. Her party accepted that amendment on the 4th of February. If she wasn't going to wait for the outcome of that, why is she moving this process today?
Yes, I think that is an excellent question. We asked for the release of documents, and then when the evidence came showing what the Cabinet Secretary had said in November 24 about what full due process was, it was very clear that those instructions had not been followed. We also know that this latest information about the problems with the security vetting did not come from the humble address, it came from a leak to The Guardian. So why should we wait for a never-never process that is clearly not happening? Even members of the Intelligence and Security Committee in that SA24 debate last week said that there were delays to the release of the documents. So, Mr. Speaker, members opposite want to pretend that this is something that only one party is doing. Can I remind them that this is a cross-party motion supported by independents, the Lib Dems, the DUP, the SNP, members from across this House? Calling this a stunt is disrespecting this House and disrespecting the Speaker. It's very obvious, listening to the media and their tweets, it's very obvious they've all been told to come here today, tell everybody it's a stunt, tell everybody it's a stunt. Why are they acting like sheep? Why are they acting like sheep? They should be better than that. We will be counting, by the way. Some people might even be shouting bingo at how many times people stand up and say that this is a stunt in this debate. We're looking forward to it. Mr. Speaker, there is a... Yes, I will give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. I think she's being a little too harsh to the limited number of Labour MPs opposite. I mean, here we have the entire reputation of the Prime Minister of this country, the leader of their party, and they're not turning out for him because they know that he is now a laughingstock, and having called round them, they found out they had to put a 3-line whip to get them to protect his blushes. So, can my right honourable friend be a little bit kinder to the members opposite, especially the brave ones, who are actually prepared to come out and defend the indefensible?
I thank my right honourable friend for that intervention. I will do my best to be kind, because he is right. There are more people here today than there were last time, so the whips have really been working hard in the last 7 days. Last week, not a single Labour MP bothered to intervene. Now, we've got a second one. I'm going to take an intervention from the right honourable gentleman, and then I'll come to the Labour MP.
Very grateful to the Leader of the Opposition. She's right to highlight the cross-party nature of this motion and also question the applicability of a whip in refusing a motion before the House. Does she not agree, and should Labour MPs not consider that if there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear?
The honourable gentleman makes an excellent point. I completely agree with him, and in fact I will be making that case in due course, but I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Well, I thank her for giving way. And a moment ago, she talked about selective quoting, and I'm sure that she would not want to selectively quote Sir Ollie Robbins herself. So could she tell us what the rest of that quote was? And when he talked about pressure, was he talking about pressure to deliver a decision in time for President Trump's inauguration, or was he saying that he felt pressure to materially change what that decision would be? Because that is quite an important distinction, is it not?
It is quite important, and if it was, why didn't the Prime Minister say so last week? Why did he say no pressure whatsoever? He should go and read the Hansard, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, I will give way on that point.
Friend, for giving way on that point. Are we really suggesting in this debate in this chamber that anyone who does not fully, comprehensively, without any hesitation, pass vetting should be given the most important role in our ambassadorship? The opposition seem to be suggesting that someone who is borderline, that there are any red flags, should be put in this sort of role. Is that not absolutely extraordinary?
It is extraordinary, and the evidence which we've heard from the Foreign Affairs Select Committee this morning is only making this matter worse for the Prime Minister. So it is very wrong for them to be talking about a stunt. This is about the integrity of this House. Why is the Privileges Committee only a political stunt when Labour is in the dock? Do they still believe that honesty and accountability matter when it is one of their own? Do they believe that Labour Prime Ministers should be held to the exact same standards that they held Conservative Prime Ministers to? Or do they believe that there should be an honesty discount because the Prime Minister is Labour? The fact that there are so few Cabinet Ministers sitting on the front bench, they've had to dig deep to the bottom of the barrel for junior ministers to come and sit there, I think shows that they're struggling to get support for this. But let me tell Labour, I'm going to make some progress, Mr. Speaker. Let me, I would say very gently, in fact kindly, I would say kindly to Labour MPs, as I've been asked to, that if they vote against this motion today, they are admitting that Labour has lower standards and should be held to a lower standard than everyone else. Because when they were elected, they promised their constituents integrity and higher standards, and I'm sure for most of them at the time they meant it. This country is the mother of all parliaments. This vote today is about Parliament. It's not about the Labour Party. It is about the Prime Minister being held to account. To those people saying this is a stunt, this is about whether the Prime Minister is accountable not just to the opposition, but to them and their own constituents. Members opposite may believe that the Prime Minister is telling the truth. As the Speaker said, they are not being asked whether the Prime Minister is telling the truth. They are being asked whether the committee should investigate whether the Prime Minister told the truth. That is a different thing. The question is whether there is a case to answer that he misled this House and has failed to correct the record. Yes, I'll give way.
Thank the right honourable member for giving way. The British public are already fed up with politicians. We see that in general elections, the low turnout rate. What we have here is a prime example of why the British public has lost confidence. We are trying to shield and hide from the public the truth. Does the right honourable member agree that in order to restore that trust, this Prime Minister must be put in front of a committee?
I do agree that this is a matter of trust with the public. We have to show that we do things properly here. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, the question is whether there is a case to answer that the Prime Minister misled this House and has failed to correct the record. If there is a credible case that he did, then this matter should be referred to the Committee of Privileges. Those are the rules of the House. Let me quickly run through the facts to make sure that every Labour MP hears them. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister appointed Peter Mandelson before security vetting was granted, in direct contravention of the advice given to him on the 11th of November 2024 by the then Cabinet Secretary. That is not due process. The Prime Minister's own National Security Advisor described the appointment and due diligence as weirdly rushed, and the Foreign Office weren't asked to feed in. That is not due process. The chair of the Labour Party has a lot to say, so I'm going to give way and let her say what it is that she wants to. Would you like to speak up? Yes.
The Cabinet Secretary said that it was due process.
Mr. Speaker, I think we have another minister who has just come to the dispatch box and said something that is quite different. Simon Case, the then Cabinet Secretary, has set out what the full due process was. A note from the Cabinet Minister a year after the appointment, after Peter Mandelson had been sacked, after I asked questions at the dispatch box, is not an exoneration, it is part of the cover-up. Mr. Speaker, we have been told by Sir Ollie Robbins, that the former Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office, that the government showed a dismissive attitude to vetting and even argued that Peter Mandelson did not need any vetting. That is not due process. I'll give way in a moment. We have been told that Number 10 put constant pressure on the Foreign Office to approve the application. That is not due process. Sir Philip Barton, the former Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office, said he was, and I quote, presented with a decision that there was no space for dialogue. That's Philip Barton this morning. He also confirmed that the normal order is vetting and then announcement. But in this case, the announcement was before the vetting. That is not due process. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Can I thank the opposition leader for bringing this forward and for their introduction? Does the opposition leader agree that there is a very dangerous pattern emerging in government judgment and bypassing vetting to appoint Lord Mandelson, a man with a well-documented security concerns? And does the opposition leader also express concern about handpicking an Attorney-General whose hands are still warm from the working of defending Gerry Adams against the very victims of IRA terror? It is little wonder that the people of this nation are concerned out there in the streets. They're worried, they're concerned, and well done to the opposition leader in bringing this forward.
Order. Sorry. You're straying outside the debate, Mr. Shannon, and we mustn't do that. Come back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am concerned about the Prime Minister's judgment on all manner of issues, not just the one that we're discussing today. But we've heard this morning, Mr. Speaker, that even the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff says that it shouldn't have been him doing the due diligence, and that what he got back from Mandelson wasn't the full truth, but the Prime Minister appointed Peter Mandelson anyway. That's Morgan McSweeney saying that is not full due process. On several counts, Mr. Speaker, it is clear the full due process was in fact not followed in this appointment. They shouldn't worry, I will let them give way because I want them to make fools of themselves at every opportunity. So just be patient, I will give way in a moment. Even the Prime Minister's current position, Mr. Speaker, contains a glaring logical inconsistency. How can he say that full process was followed and at the same time fire Sir Ollie Robbins for not following process? If the honourable gentleman would answer that question, that would be fantastic.
I asked the shadow opposition leader the question. That's how it works on an intervention. And can I also suggest to her that if she wants backbenchers to support her motion, she shouldn't be insulting us and calling us shit. I think that the critical question that a lot of backbenchers are wanting to know here is why now? Why, when the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has not concluded its investigations, has she brought this motion forward now? Is it because there is local elections next week, or is that a coincidence?
I'm sorry. The decision was made on the letter that's been sent to me, not on whether somebody may be meeting somewhere else. It is judged on that merit. I don't need to be questioned again.
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman would like his ministerial job back. That's the only explanation for why he was asking that question. So I did ask, if full due process was followed, why was Sir Ollie Robbins sacked? No answer. The Privileges Committee is clear that misleading intentionally or recklessly, refusing to answer legitimate questions, or failing to correct misleading statements impedes or frustrates the functioning of the House and is a contempt. That's what the Privileges Committee says. The Prime Minister has not answered legitimate questions on this appointment. They were all there at PMQs when I asked him whether he spoke to Peter Mandelson before the appointment about 6 times, and the Prime Minister refused to answer. Contempt. This is no longer just about the appointment of Peter Mandelson or the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. This is about whether or not the Prime Minister should be referred for contempt of Parliament. The Honourable Member for Warwick and Leamington said last week, I don't know if he is in the chamber, he said last week that the Prime Minister is a man of the utmost decency who would never, ever lie. If that is the case, they should welcome this chance to prove that. If they really believed that statement, they would not have to be whipped to block an investigation. The privileges... Yes, I will give way to the Right Honourable Gentleman.
I'm grateful for the Right Honourable Lady giving way. She will know that I was never a fan of Boris Johnson. No. But when there was a similar motion for the House to refer Mr Johnson to the Privileges Committee, his side was not whipped. Can she confirm that? And can she question why the government is whipping its side on this matter?
That is an excellent question from the Right Honourable Gentleman. I can confirm that this side was not whipped. I can also confirm that the leader of the head of the Privileges Committee was a former acting leader of the Labour Party. We trusted this House to do the right thing. Why can they not do the same? Why? Mr. Speaker, the Privileges Committee is made up mostly of Labour MPs. Are they saying that they do not believe that their own colleagues would give the Prime Minister a fair hearing? Are they saying that? If this was just a bad decision that he's apologised for, then surely the Privileges Committee will find him not guilty. I give way to my right honourable friend.
Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the Prime Minister is pursuing a scorched earth policy? Advisor after civil servant has been chucked under the bus to save his skin, and now it is the turn of his own MPs. For if the Prime Minister had not misled the House, then the correct path is to go to the Privileges Committee so the Prime Minister can clear his name.
I do agree with my right honourable friend. This is a scorched earth policy, and they are the earth, and I'm afraid to say they are being scorched. Let me ask them this, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, why is he whipping to avoid scrutiny? Why? Why is he whipping? They are being whipped today to exonerate him before the facts have even been tested. It is not for the first time I am having to tell Labour MPs that they are being stitched up. This is a man who has led them up and down so many hills. Our Education Secretary wants to intervene. Would she like to talk about the U-turn yesterday on social media? No, she doesn't want to. Shame. We got our U-turn, Mr. Speaker. We got our U-turn. They have to sit there looking embarrassed at every decision that they have to roll back on. This is a man who has led them up and down so many hills. He sends them out to defend the indefensible even this afternoon, and it's a great effort by the whips, I must say. I know someone else wants to intervene. Please go on.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do thank her for giving way. And of course, she's right that the Conservatives did get a free vote on the Partygate scandal. She chose to abstain, which is an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. The bigger disgrace. The bigger disgrace was voting against action on own. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bigger disgrace was voting against action on Owen Parson, and she voted against that. Another disgrace. Whipped.
Mr. Speaker, I actually feel bad at having to make this explanation. And I say to my right honourable friend, I am trying to be kind, but there was no vote, so no abstention, because not a single one of us voted to block the investigation. This is a clear example of the Mr. Speaker, I'm not giving way. He's had his chance, Mr. Speaker. This just goes.
If the Honourable Lady, Right Honourable Lady, gives way, that's fine. You've had one crack at the whip. I wouldn't try too many cracks.
Mr. Speaker, this is why I am telling. I know a lot of Labour MPs have not been in this situation before. They are being stitched up. I am trying to be helpful. This man has led them up so many hills and down again. U-turn after U-turn. I talked about banning social media for children. There was also a U-turn on the pensions mandation. This is a government that does not know what it is doing. It is a government that does not know what it is doing. And I think it's very valiant of them to come out to defend the Prime Minister. This is despite the fact that he took the whip away from MPs who wanted to lift the two-child benefit cap. And then he did it anyway. The member for Hayes and Harlington had the whip removed for opposing the two-child benefit cap. Then the Prime Minister U-turned. The member for York Central had the whip removed for voting against the Prime Minister's welfare reforms. Then he ditched the reforms. And then the member for Penrith, who had the whip removed for opposing the family farm tax. The Prime Minister's ditched that, but the member for Penrith still doesn't have the whip back. And this matters, Mr. Speaker.
I know. It is about the privilege motion. I know you're developing a theme, but I think we've run out of theme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're absolutely right. I'm just pointing out the question, why is this a whip vote? It will still happen anyway. This man has ruined the reputation of the Labour Party, has not been loyal to his own MPs, and I don't think that they are united. Yes, I will give way.
When the Prime Minister came in, he said he wanted to do things differently. He's had not one but two opportunities to, in an emergency debate tabled by this side of the House, to come to the House and answer all these questions, so he wouldn't need to go to a Privileges Committee. Can she advise on why he may not have come to the House to answer on both two occasions?
I think it is an excellent question from my honourable friend. Why not come to the House to correct the record at the earliest opportunity on multiple occasions? What is there to hide? We are hearing evidence in the select committees that is conflicting what is being said on the floor of the House. I would be very interested, by the way, if the Minister, when he is responding, is happy to repeat the Prime Minister's words at the dispatch box that there was no pressure whatsoever. Would he repeat that question? Would he repeat that statement? Let's see how brave he is. Mr. Speaker, this is absolutely critical. This cannot just be a debate about the Labour Party or a division between those who are on the inner circle and those who are on the outside. Again and again, we have seen the children of the chosen ones, people who had never been in Parliament before, getting all the best jobs. We now have the sacked Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. His wife is a whip, telling people to vote for a cover-up. That is not right. That is not right. They are hanging. She has been notified. I know they don't like it. Have I said something that is not true? No, I'm speaking the truth. I know it hurts, but someone has to point it out. They are hanging everyone else out to dry, and I cannot believe that Labour MPs are letting this happen again. I know that a lot of them are expecting a reshuffle after the May election. Let me tell them, it is not worth it. I say directly to those Labour MPs hoping to be ministers after May the 7th, you will condemn yourself to being sent out on the morning round to repeat things that you know are not true, that you don't believe in, and that you know will end in disaster. And they will end in disaster, Mr. Speaker, as everything the Prime Minister touches does. This vote should not be about loyalty to the Prime Minister, but about standards. Why should Labour MPs ruin their reputations to save a man who has never shown loyalty to them? He has shown that he will throw everybody under a bus. Sue Gray, Morgan McSweeney, Sir Chris Wilmord, Sir Ollie Robbins. Do Labour MPs really think that if this goes wrong, he's not going to throw all of them under a bus? There are some of them walking around Parliament telling everyone that they're going to be one-term MPs, and so it doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. Because when they leave this place, no one is going to remember what their whips told them to do. People will only remember that they voted for a cover-up. That is what will follow them around like a bad smell until the end of their careers. That's what's going to be in their Wikipedia entries. Yes, I will give way.
Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this issue will be resolved in one or two places? It will either be resolved in the Court of Public Opinion or in front of the Privileges Committee. And it's actually in the Prime Minister's interests to have it resolved by a cross-party committee of this House, which would give confidence to the public that the truth had been found, that the case had been made or not, and that they would have confidence going forward. The public will make up its own mind without the Privileges Committee. Yes.
That's right. The Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right. I trust the Privileges Committee to do the right thing, as I always have. And I've got some advice for Labour MPs. There is nothing wrong, yes, there is nothing wrong with giving your party leader the benefit of the doubt. There's nothing wrong with that. As a minister 4 years ago, I gave my party... I don't know why they're laughing. I haven't got to the punchline yet. Hang on, wait for it. As a minister 4 years ago, I gave my party leader the benefit of the doubt, but I trusted the Privileges Committee to do the right thing, even when it was led by a former leader of the Labour Party. We did not block the Privileges Committee looking into things, and the minute that I was asked to go out and say something that wasn't true, I resigned. None of them want to do that. I will always be able to hold my head up high because I did the right thing. I do not understand why Labour MPs are quite happy repeating things that aren't true. We have all seen the Hansard. That's the difference between them and us. When we get things wrong, we put our hands up and say so. They pretend, Mr. Speaker, they pretend that the wrong thing is actually the right thing. They pretend that the bad thing is actually a good thing because it's Labour MPs who are doing it. That's what they're being whipped to do today. It's the same way the Mandelson appointment happened. Because they thought they were appointing him, it must be a good thing. That's what's happening again today. They are being whipped to do the wrong thing. If they are telling the entire country that nothing matters, in a moment, if they are telling the entire country that nothing matters except avoiding scrutiny of this Prime Minister who won't answer questions at that dispatch box, then they're telling people that the Labour Party is not worth voting for. It does not exist. That this is not the Labour Party of Attlee and Bevan and Wilson. That Labour Party no longer exists because they would never do this. They would never be voting for someone who had stood at that dispatch box less than a week ago and read out doctored statements from the head of the Foreign Office like the Prime Minister did. Yes, I will give way. I will give way.
On the point of reading out statements, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. I can see that she's enjoying reading out her statement. But what I can't see
What I can't see is the case that she's making about the Privileges Committee. What I can't see is what she doesn't think is right about a criminal investigation, about inquiries that are consistently being made about the decision that was made that we have accepted was wrong. What's wrong with the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and what's wrong with the processes that are in...
I'm sorry, you're out of scope. Come here.
Perhaps she should have just taken the whip's questions instead of messing that one up. She does raise an interesting point about the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. It's only looking at Mandelson. It's not looking into the issue of the Prime Minister misleading the House. Let's stop pretending that the Select Committee is a massive inquiry. It really isn't. Yes.
Mr. Rushworth, are you sure it's point for it? Let's hear it.
A moment ago, the Leader of the Opposition described the statement made by the Prime Minister as doctored. Now, doctored is akin to saying that it was dishonest, that it was lying. Is that not unparliamentary language, Mr. Speaker?
Oh, no. As I suspected, it's not a point of order. You need to read the rule book. This is a substantive motion. This isn't the normal debate. So please, it might be helpful if you took some time out rather than question. You might be onto something, but it's not today.
Mr. Speaker, time and time again throughout this debate, I've seen Labour MPs stand up showing that they do not understand what the rules are or what this is about. This is not about whether or not, it's not about the specific statements, this is about whether or not we should have a referral to the Privileges Committee. They are moving the goalposts because they don't want to answer that simple question. And they've come up with all sorts of excuses. It is not an excuse to say that there is a war on. The Prime Minister has said repeatedly that we are not in this war. He can't have it both ways. At every turn, he has tried to deny this House full transparency over this appointment. We had a vote in the House for documents to be released, and yet we discover that documents are not being released. That is a contempt of this Parliament. Labour MPs supported that humble address because they knew that we needed to see the truth. Documents from that release show due process was not followed. The ISC is complaining that the documents are being delayed. We only discovered there were numerous problems with Mandelson's vetting because of a leak to The Guardian. The truth is being covered up. Today's vote is about whether they want to be complicit in this cover-up. If they vote against that investigation by the Privileges Committee, they are in this together. This motion is supported across the House, Mr. Speaker, including by Labour MPs, which is why they have to be whipped to vote against it. The member for Hull East was tweeting, saying that he was making a referral to privileges last week before he deleted that tweet. This week, he's calling it a stunt. Why? Who's twisting his arm? Why was it not a stunt last week when he was doing it, but it's a stunt this week when everybody else is doing it? Why? For those who are mindlessly repeating the lines the Labour whips have given them, may I remind them that it is also their job to hold the government to account and uphold the standards of our democracy. Appointing a known national security risk to be ambassador to the United States is a profound failure of government. Do they not think that it is important that Prime Ministers tell the truth on a matter of national security? Or do they think that this is an internal Labour Party matter that they can fix themselves? And for those people who believe that Andy Burnham is coming to rescue them, can I just say that if they vote against this investigation, there will be so much contempt for Labour that there is no by-election on this planet that Andy Burnham will be able to win. This is not an internal Labour Party matter, Mr. Speaker. Do they believe that when something is wrong, we should look into it? This is about whether they believe that Prime Ministers should not destroy the careers of civil servants to cover up for their own failures. I know it is very difficult for Labour MPs to walk through the lobby with other parties. But let me be clear what they are saying if they vote against this motion. Would they rather be on the side of Peter Mandelson, of convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, of Morgan McSweeney and Matthew Doyle, on the side of the man who sacks Sir Chris Wormald, sacks Sir Ollie Robbins, Sue Gray? Is that what they came to Parliament for? Yesterday, we read that the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent South said we should do this so she could pay off her new kitchen. Do they really want to tell their constituents that they voted against this inquiry because they are more concerned about their own personal finances than probity in public life, because that is a shocking statement. Every MP voting on this motion today will need to examine their conscience on all sides of the House, Mr. Speaker. This is not a matter of party loyalty. It is a matter of what each and every one of us believes is right. They are being asked to defend a man who has let the country down, he has let Parliament down, and let's be honest, he has let the Labour Party down. So I say to Labour MPs today, you can defend the Prime Minister today, and there are enough of you to get through the vote, but you will be complicit in a shameful abandoning of promises made to the electorate, promises every Labour MP stood on. It is up to them what kind of MP they choose to be. They can choose to live up to their promises on standards to ensure proper scrutiny takes place and allow the Privileges Committee to get to the bottom of this, or they can choose to put party before country. Their vote will define them, and the public is watching. They say it's a stunt, then let the inquiry expose it. They say there's no evidence of misleading the House, then let the committee test it. They say the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, then they shouldn't vote to stop the Prime Minister being scrutinised. They don't have to defend this. They can still do the right thing. They can show that Parliament matters. It matters more than any party or any faction. They can vote to enhance Parliament, or they can vote and prove the worst fears of people who think there is one rule for Labour and another rule for everyone else. Mr. Speaker, I commend this motion to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper. Emma Lowell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have watched this whole sorry saga play out for weeks now. Like the public, I feel let down, disappointed, and I am angry. Peter Mandelson should never have been appointed. This was a fundamental failure of judgment. Matthew Doyle should never have been given a peerage. This was also a failure of judgment. I feel the way that today's vote has been handled by the government smacks once again of being out of touch and disconnected from the public mood. The fact that MPs like me are being whipped into voting against this motion is, in my view, wrong, Mr. Speaker. It has played into the terrible narrative that there is something to hide, and good, decent colleagues will be accused of being complicit in a cover-up. A number of weeks ago, at a private meeting with my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, I spoke about how, after a career of working so closely with victims of child sexual abuse, that I could not even begin to express how much it hurts me when people are screaming at me in the street that I am a member of the Pedo Protectors Party. I also said that prior to this scandal, people criticised the government's policies and at times lack of political narrative. But to me, they are now questioning the government's moral compass. My comments were leaked almost immediately by colleagues who were present. My words were then used later by the Leader of the Opposition. Recent weeks have since seen such abuse intensify and ongoing abuse and threats to mine and my staff's safety continue. Privilege motions, ISC investigations, committee hearings and process don't come up on the doorstep. What does come up time and time again is a general feeling that there is something just not right, that politicians are failing to deliver on their promises. Trust has gone and it's been replaced by anger, and the already fragile fabric of our democracy is eroding further every day this continues. This Prime Minister is very careful with his words and does have respect for the office he holds. He does want to change this country for the better, and he truly believes in public service, something which in recent years may have been sorely lacking from previous Prime Ministers. So I can't understand, Mr. Speaker, why the Prime Minister doesn't refer himself to the committee with a clear statement that he is doing so to clear his name. One quick session of the committee could surely see this matter concluded. Instead, it will now drag on and dominate every headline and interview. It will overshadow and undermine every good policy we make and continue to drag every single one of us down. whether any Prime Minister misled the House or not, is not a matter for the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, nor is it a matter for the Intelligence and Security Committee. It is a matter for privileges. That's why such a committee exists. It may be that opposition parties are using this motion today to box Labour MPs in, but I'm not angry about that. That's politics. Some of us here would do the same. But I know one thing for certain today, Mr. Speaker, that I will not be voting against this motion, but I want to listen carefully to the rest of this debate, because like everyone, when I came to this House, I wanted to do the right thing, and I hope I continue to do that for however long I have left in this place.
David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to follow the Honourable Lady, the member of South Shields, who I think has made a very powerful speech. And I think we all, on all sides, listen to it, and I hope her colleagues on the government benches listen to it and think about it carefully during the passage of this debate. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister called this motion a stunt. That is not why I put my name to it. But it's funny, though. I was just checking whether they were awake, Mr. Speaker. But it is funny, though, because stunt is exactly the same word Boris Johnson used about the motion that the Prime Minister and I tabled 4 years ago, referring Boris Johnson to the Privileges Committee. Ironic, Alanis Morissette could probably write a whole album about it. It wasn't a stunt then, and it isn't a stunt today. It is, as the Prime Minister said back then, a motion that, and I quote, seeks to defend the simple principle that honesty, integrity and telling the truth matter in our politics. Honesty, integrity, telling the truth. These things matter in our nation's parliament perhaps more than anywhere else. And when I hear the Prime Minister complain that we've tabled this motion just over a week before important elections, I find myself transported back to that debate 4 years ago, 7 days before crucial local elections. At that time, Conservative MP after Conservative MP made exactly the same bogus argument in defence of Boris Johnson. So I do have to say, although there are differences in the whipping arrangements, I do find it very hard to take some of the sanctimony from the leader of the Conservative Party seriously. She and her Conservative colleagues propped up Boris Johnson back then. She called him a great Prime Minister, and even after the game was up and Johnson was gone, she dismissed the Partygate scandal and called it overblown. So it does seem there's quite a lot of hypocrisy to go round, Mr. Speaker. But I want to try and be consistent. So I look back in Hansard at what I said back then. And I was struck that I can use exactly the same words today. With families facing the deepest fall in the living standards since the 1950s, with the pain of energy bills and rising food prices compounded by the government's unfair tax rises, we know that our constituents are facing real hardship. It's not just a cost of living crisis, it's a cost of living emergency. At such a time, the country needs a government that will be focused on tackling that economic emergency. Crucially, it needs a government that it can trust. Labour members agreed with me back then. I hope they will still agree with those words now. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
Thank the Honourable Member for giving way. He's mentioned Boris Johnson a few times, so I just wanted to remind the House that Boris Johnson misled the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and his words about my constituent, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, meant that she spent 6 extra years in jail for a crime she didn't commit. He had multiple opportunities to apologise, including when he saw Nazanin face to face. Does the Honourable Member think when someone has made a mistake, especially someone in a position of power, they should apologise?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can see from your restlessness in the chair that you don't necessarily want me to go down that particular avenue, but I hope I speak for others that we can reflect on how incredibly depressing it is that nothing has really changed. The British people are facing a cost of living emergency. They need a government focused on tackling it. They need a government they can trust. But instead, this is what we've got. A Prime Minister who promised to be different, who promised to turn the page, who promised above everything else change, but who has now mired this government in the same endless cycle of chaos and scandal as the last one. A Prime Minister who appointed Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States, even though his links to Jeffrey Epstein had been widely reported, even though those reports had been brought directly to the Prime Minister's attention, even though the Cabinet Secretary had advised him that security clearance should be acquired before the choice was confirmed. A Prime Minister who, despite all that, still told the House repeatedly that full due process was followed. A Prime Minister who says no pressure existed whatsoever to appoint Mandelson, even despite all the evidence we've heard to the contrary, as the Right Honourable Lady set out in her speech. And now a Prime Minister who desperately claims that he wouldn't have appointed Mandelson if he had known about UK security vetting's recommendation. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said we would find what he told us to be incredible, and we do. But I think it's that last part that is the most incredible of all. Does he really expect us to believe that after all of that, ignoring the clear warnings from the Propriety and Ethics team, ignoring the advice of his then Cabinet Secretary to get the security vetting done first, ignoring everything we already knew about Peter Mandelson, and announcing his appointment to the world before the vetting had been done, does the Prime Minister really expect us to believe that if he'd been given the same recommendation as Ollie Robbins, that it was a borderline case, that he'd have cancelled the appointment? Do honourable members opposite really believe that's what would have happened? Because that claim is now all that's left of the Prime Minister's case for the defence, and I'm afraid it just doesn't stand up. So, Mr. Speaker, I will finish not with my own words, but with the words of another honourable member 4 years ago, the now right honourable member for Ashton-under-Lyne. I know her words carry a lot of weight on Labour benches. She said, and I quote, "The only way to get to the bottom of this issue and regain public confidence in our democracy is by respecting the processes that have been created to enshrine the rules of our Parliament." I point out that process we are following today is in place only because the Prime Minister has failed to do the decent thing and resign. I repeat, honesty, integrity and the truth matter in our politics. Today, MPs across the House have the opportunity to defend those principles and to vote to support our democracy. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady was right back then. That is the opportunity before MPs today, and I urge us all to take it.
Brenda Singh-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I spoke in the emergency motion debate, and I spoke about the appointment of Peter Mandelson in the first instance, the approach taken by the Prime Minister as details have become available, and finally the vetting process overall. Today I want to address the motion and why I feel it's premature. And in doing so, I believe there are three principles of this House that are key to our consideration today, and that is transparency, due process and proportionality. A privileged motion is a serious matter and a tool available for Parliament to use in such circumstances. And whilst the motion is there to address such matters, it is also the case that use of a privileged motion impacts on the integrity of the House and its procedures. And deploying a privileged motion prematurely or in the absence of full and proper grounds has the ability to impact negatively on the integrity of the House. And I am clear that any allegations or concerns must be addressed.
Refer the member to the words of the Speaker earlier. It's the Speaker that decides whether or not a privilege motion goes ahead. So he's criticising the Speaker for having allowed it.
So my point is about what our consideration of it, the fact that the Speaker has decided we are here discussing it, and I'm putting a case forward about why I think it's premature to vote for it today. Just because the Leader of the Opposition and others have decided to put it does not make it right. It's clearly a political and partisan process. And I'm very clear that any allegations or concerns must be addressed, and it's quite clear that the Prime Minister is clearly of this view as well, and which is why we have the humble address, why we've got ongoing inquiries by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and even an ongoing police investigation. It is right and proper that all allegations should be examined thoroughly and that these processes should be allowed to run their course. And whilst there is that is all ongoing, I would suggest this privileged motion is premature.
Who's giving a powerful speech. He said that all allegations should be investigated properly. Well, with greatest respect to him, the Foreign Affairs Committee isn't looking into whether the Prime Minister misled the House.
Neither are the police.
Neither are the police. There is no process other than the one which the Speaker has allowed to be addressed today, and that is to refer the issue of whether the Prime Minister has misled this House should be determined by the Privileges Committee. And if the honourable gentleman is going to be consistent, he should agree with that and he should vote for it today.
I think the honourable gentleman, you should understand that the only reason we're here today is because of things that have been determined either through the release of papers for the humble address or evidence people are given to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. And that's why we're here. So for him to say that those processes have no relevance in this process is absolutely wrong. They absolutely have full relevance. And my whole case is that we should let those processes complete their entire run before, and that's why I believe this is premature. I'll come back in a bit. I want to make a bit of progress. So it is right and proper that all allegations should be examined thoroughly and those processes should run their course. And whilst that is all going on, I would suggest this privileged motion is premature. More than that, it's a clear attempt to bypass the processes already taking place, as I just said. Mr. Speaker, whatever one's views of the substantive issue, there are some things that we should all agree on, and that is that the Prime Minister has been forthcoming in addressing the allegations, both in this House and outside. The Prime Minister has apologised from the very outset for the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson in this House and outside, and apologies that have been full, wholesome and without equivocation. He has also specifically apologised to the victims of apathy. The Prime Minister has repeatedly answered questions in this House and outside and shown a willingness to be held accountable.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for giving way. Whatever the merits of this motion, does he accept that the party whip should not be exercised where politicians are constrained and cannot support or go against a particular motion? Does he agree that that whip should be withdrawn?
Mr. Speaker, I'm a humble backbencher, and I would not disagree with my chief whip in terms of their decisions on how to apply the whip. That's a matter for them. The inquiries, all those inquiries I've talked about are ongoing and they are being robustly pursued. Mr. Speaker, I fear therefore that this motion risks setting an unhealthy precedent. That unproven allegations alone are sufficient to utilise the most serious, one of Parliament's most serious procedures. And this is not something any of us should be comfortable with. The naked politicising of this process will not serve Parliament well. My fear, Mr. Speaker, my further fear, Mr. Speaker, is that whilst people on the opposition benches are seeking to utilise this procedure in this way, some of those honourable members on the opposition benches will already be looking to see what other procedures they can use to further extend this process in this partisan way. Mr. Speaker, it is incumbent on all of us to give consideration to due process and proportionality. Diverting away from the high standards voters expect of this House risks damaging confidence in Parliament itself. There are substantial parliamentary and other processes already underway. We should not preempt those processes, which is what this has the potential to do, but should allow them to complete their procedures. That is in the best interest of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. It's in the best interest of transparency, due process and proportionality, and that's why I call on members to vote against this motion.
Sir David Dix.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes the wisdom of the House is crystallised in the comments of us ordinary backbenchers, and particularly today with the brave speech of the Honourable Lady for and indeed with the intervention of the Honourable Member for Perry Barr on the Leader of the Opposition. Both of them, in effect, said
that what we have lived through in these last several months is a tragedy, not just for this House, not just for the government, not just for the Labour Party, but for the trust in government, the trust in our democracy of ordinary people. Now, at the risk of expulsion from my own party, I will admit to having hoped after the election that the Prime Minister would succeed, because it's in the interest of the country that he did. But in some ways, even more importantly, it's in the interest of our democracy that he did, because there is already extant throughout the entire Western world a corrosion of belief in democracy. On and on and on. This will make it worse. Now, we're here today for a simple reason. Statements by the Prime Minister made in this chamber are at odds with those provided by the civil service on the material issue of Peter Mandelson. This matters. It's not a stunt, it matters. Honesty between ministers and Parliament is fundamental to our democracy. Without it, scrutiny fails. Without it, accountability fails. Without it, trust fails. The responsibility for absolute honesty rests most heavily on the Prime Minister. So the standard that should be met by the Prime Minister is even higher than for others. Recklessness with the truth for any minister is unacceptable. From the Prime Minister, it's indefensible. Now, all political parties have their inherent flaws, and I'm not going to spend a whole day talking about mine. But the origins of this situation, the origins of this situation lie in a stance often taken by Labour MPs, which is that good intentions somehow justify bad decisions. We mean well, so our mistakes don't matter. Worse, we mean well, so we should be forgiven for everything, whether it's freebies or wrong appointments or whatever. That mindset, which I'm afraid is sort of sanctimonious arrogance, sustained by a habit of believing their own propaganda, is precisely what led to the appointment of a deeply unsuitable individual as our ambassador to Washington. A man twice dismissed after scandal. A man under formal investigation now by the EU's anti-fraud office. A man with an extraordinary relationship with a convicted paedophile. A man driven above all by a pursuit of glamour, money and status. A man who turned amorality into an art form. And in addition to that, a man who has plainly compromised by an over-close relationship with the proxies of both the Russian and the Chinese government. Together, these facts should have made this appointment unthinkable. Yet these concerns were brushed aside. The head of the diplomatic service, we heard this morning in the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, was not even consulted. Why? Because within the London establishment, a ludicrous self-deception had taken hold. That the peculiarities of the Trump administration could be countered to the peculiarities of Peter Mandelson. Yes, of course.
Grateful to my right honourable friend. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that almost universally the previous ambassador, Dame Karen Pierce, was widely respected and felt to have a good relationship with the previous Trump administration? There was no reason to believe she wouldn't have one with the current Trump administration.
Well, that's entirely true. And in fact, the current Trump administration made that point to the government before the nomination of Peter Mandelson. So that perverse logic led to the most obviously unwise public appointment in modern times. And the implied message, unfortunately, was clear. Government appointments rest on networks of patronage. Great offices of state are perks to be handed out to friends. And it's systemic. They even tried to get an ambassadorial appointment for Lord Doyle, a man so unsuitable he's even had their whip withdrawn. Mandelson's unsuitability was evident before vetting began. It would have been surprising had the vetting service not found grounds to reject the appointment. I suspect Number 10 knew that, and they leaned on the Foreign Office to ensure the outcome was secured quickly and without question. And by the way, one of the honourable members, I can't remember his name or seat, tried to suggest that pressure for time is different from pressure on outcome. When it's vetting, it's not. I mean, my first positive vetting took 6 months. Now, I know I've got an unreliable friend. Fewer, I think, than Lord Mandelson. It would have taken quite a long time to get to the bottom of all the issues raised at Lord Mandelson. So saying you've got to do it quickly is the same as you've got to do it shoddily. So let's not lose sight of it. I'll give way.
Francois, he's making an excellent speech. But is it not true that the post of UK ambassador to Washington would be held by someone who would therefore have access to extremely sensitive intelligence, potentially including nuclear cooperation, and the fact that Mandelson had been found to have been working for a Russian company post the invasion of Ukraine should have completely barred him from that appointment on that one ground alone?
My honourable friend is exactly right, and indeed it's worse than that, because it is the nexus, that post is the nexus of the entire Five Eyes intelligence cooperation. And in our service, it's not like the Americans. In the American embassies, the CIA is freestanding. The ambassador doesn't matter. In our service, the ambassador runs the local secret service element, if you like. And so he is or she is entirely responsible and has entire access. And it's particularly an issue with the Americans, because the Americans are incredibly sensitive about the corruption or in any way undermining the security of that arrangement. So we could actually put at risk the whole Five Eyes cooperation arrangement, but the honourable friend leads me off on a completely different tangent. So when asked this morning, to come back to the general point, when asked this morning about delay and attitude and pressure, so when asked this morning at the Foreign Affairs Select Committee if he recalled any dismissiveness in number 10 about the importance of Mandelson's vetting, Sir Philip Barton, that's Ollie Robbins' predecessor, described number 10 as uninterested in his security clearance. The evidence Sir Ollie Robbins gave was that throughout January there was constant pressure and an atmosphere of constant chasing. Yesterday, Ian Collard, the former head of the Foreign Office security team, corroborated Sir Ollie Robbins' account. And just this morning, again, Sir Philip Barton repeatedly emphasised there was pressure to secure Mandelson's vetting clearance within, I quote, a very compressed timescale. And the Prime Minister told this House only a week ago, no pressure existed whatsoever. Now, if that was the only issue, that would justify being referred to the Privileged Committee to resolve what the exact truth was. But it wasn't. Because plainly there, if the Foreign Office is right, the Prime Minister is wrong, and on that timetable, actually deliberately wrong. But let's take some other occasions. On the 4th of February this year, the Prime Minister gave an unambiguous impression when asked about Epstein's coverage in the security clearance that he'd seen Peter Mandelson's security vetting. But in April, he told the House, on the 14th of April, he found out for the first time that Mandelson had been granted developed vetting clearance against a specific recommendation for the United Kingdom security vetting, that developed vetting clearance should be denied. These two statements are incompatible. Again, a freestanding failure of the rules. And more, this chaotic clash of opinions reinforces the impression that far from following due process, as the Prime Minister has maintained on a number of occasions, number 10 was effectively making it up as it went along. On the 11th of November 2024, the then Cabinet Secretary Simon Case, as we've heard already from the Leader of the Opposition, issued explicit advice: secure the necessary security clearances before confirming your choice. Again, this was reinforced this morning by Sir Philip Barton, who described the correct process as, quote, the normal order is vetting and then announcement. Normal due process was clear, but the Prime Minister did the opposite. Claims that this was normal defy common sense. For career ambassadors, the DV, the direct vetting, happens at every new post. You go to become an ambassador in Tehran, you're DV'd. You go to become an ambassador in Washington, you're DV'd again. But the DV is an update, so it's lower risk, and by definition, our ambassadors, generally speaking, are low-risk security personnel anyway. This is plainly not the case for a high-risk figure like Peter Mandelson. Indeed, frankly, it's harder to imagine a higher-risk appointment to a post, as my honourable friend, said, is of the utmost sensitivity. To appoint first and vet later is not due process. It's certainly not prudent. It's a gamble with national security and a risk to our single most important alliance. So there are 3 instances where the Prime Minister made questionable statements. His insistence that there was no pressure when there evidently was, the 2 versions he gave on when he saw the vetting file, and the assertion that due process was followed when it clearly was at odds with the process described by both the Cabinet Secretary and the Permanent Secretary for the Foreign Office. So the Prime Minister made a deeply questionable decision. Whether it was cronyism, a misunderstanding of the role, or excessive leniency towards a member of his own party, something he would never have tolerated, quite rightly, from any other party, we cannot know for certain. Whatever the explanation, the conclusion is unavoidable. The decision was wrong. And to implement it, established procedures were bent out of shape. The civil service was placed under extreme pressure to deliver outcomes that sat on the margins of propriety. When concerns were raised, they were not confronted, but sidestepped. As usual in number 10, an attempt was made to place the blame on somebody else. Even in this week's New Statesman, traditionally a banner carrier for the Prime Minister, even in this week's New Statesman, I think it was Tom McTague's article, there is a quote from a senior government official who goes on at length against the Prime Minister, but he ends by saying, ask Chris, ask Sue, ask Morgan, ask Ollie. He will say he takes responsibility, but then he makes everyone else pay. That's what we're looking at. So rather than addressing concerns directly, the Prime Minister proceeded regardless, and only later sought to justify his decision with answers that were, I'm afraid, frequently misleading. As a former DPP, he should have known better. What began as a mistake evolved into something more serious. A failure turned into defence, a problem became a pattern, and ultimately the situation now looks like a cover-up. But today, as we've already heard from the front bench and a number of other speakers, is not about determining guilt, it's about determining whether there is a case to answer. Finding the truth and adjudicating guilt is the task of the Committee of Privileges, which is both the time and the access required to examine the evidence in full. Now, much has been made of Boris Johnson's appearance, as it were, before the Privileges Committee, and I am famously a fan of Boris Johnson. When it was brought to this House, that question, whether it should go, it was clearly recognised at the time that this was not delivering a verdict, but was deciding whether there was a case to be answered. Now, I, at the time, with our own Whip's office, made it very plain that I would not countenance any attempt to block a proper investigation on a House of Commons matter. But I was by no means alone. There are a number of other colleagues who made the same argument. And as a result, the government of the day accepted this is a House of Commons matter.
Exactly.
It is improper for the government to intervene in such a matter to try to guide the House. Accordingly, the motion passed without a whip and without division. Interestingly, the honourable gentleman thought. Mr. Speaker, you know, in a debate which is about misleading the House, I do wonder when members of this House accuse others of not voting in a measure without a vote. So I will not be taking intervention from him. I will certainly not be taking intervention from him. As the honourable gentleman is a noisemaker, not a truth issue. On the evidence before us today, contradictions, procedural failures, and an emerging pattern of conduct, there is plainly a case for referral. Where doubt exists, it should be resolved through proper scrutiny. Where a case exists, it should be tested. This case should go to the Committee of Privileges and go today.
Carl Turner.
Thank
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the Right Honourable Gentleman for Goole and Pocklington. We rarely agree politically, him and I, but we do work together, I think, constructively in the constituency for the betterment of the region. Mr. Speaker, I start by way of an apology, because I think it was mentioned by the Leader of the Opposition. I did accidentally publish correspondence between me and you, Mr. Speaker, last week. That was my mistake. I respect you, Mr. Speaker, and I respect your office. So I apologise sincerely for that mistake. But it was my mistake. Now,